So now let's move on to smart dust.
This powder-sized chip, and that's a salt crystal, so this is a small thing, is something called the Mu chip from Hitachi. It's the smallest commercially available RFID system in the world, and can be pulse-powered by radio waves. It doesn't require a battery. You can literally scatter this stuff like dust, or embed it into a sheet of paper. And you know what the really interesting thing about this technology is? This was commercially released 10 years ago. So, the inevitability of smart dust. So what is smart dust? Well, smart dust, of course, isn't a new concept. It originated with DARPA back in the 90s. And it's general purpose computing, sensors, wireless networking, all bundled up into millimeter scale sensor modes, drifting in the air currents, flecks of computing power settling on your skin, ingested, monitoring you inside and out.
But in the future, every square inch of every city will be alive with intelligence. Because every street and every building will have a network of microcomputers built right into them. Dr. Chris Piester calls it smart dust.
A smart dust particle, or mote, is a wireless sensor with sensing, computation, communication, and power in one package.
These all-in-one microcomputers will be small, very small.
The size of a mote today is about the size of a grain of rice. And we've shown that we can make the circuitry small enough and light enough that eventually it will be possible to make things that are on a sub-millimeter size scale.
Tiny specks of computer smart dust will form a vast invisible network that can help manage the infrastructure of even the largest city.
Smart cities in the future will take this low-power, inexpensive, small technology and basically distribute it everywhere.
These tiny computers record information about their surroundings, information they can send to other computers or to you. Smart dust on the tracks will monitor your commuter train so you know if it's running late. Potholes will be able to report themselves and warn your car, and you'll never have to wait for a radio traffic report again.
They're monitoring the flow of traffic and giving you alerts about what route is the right way to go to keep the traffic moving.
Bridges will get a coating of smart dust particles that can warn us when they detect stress fractures, helping avoid deadly collapses. But smart dust will also allow buildings and streets to recognize you and respond accordingly.
I think increasingly the environment will respond to who we are and adapt in consequence.
The city will know where you are if you want it to.
Your workplace will know you. Smart dust at the entrance will boot up your computer. And smart dust embedded in the elevator doors will automatically ring your floor.
Smart dust is going to sense the environment and allow us to improve the way that we live our lives.
No matter how we live in the future city, it will be radically different.
New research in Britain has raised concerns about the potentially harmful effect of nanoparticles. The emerging technology is used in a variety of medicines and even sunscreen. The research found that the small particles could damage the DNA of cells.
They're tiny microscopic particles which can store and release drugs in specific areas of the body. As a result, nanoparticles are increasingly being used in medicine and surgery. But because the particles are so small, there's been growing concerns about potential toxicity.
There's an emerging sort of body of evidence that says that for some particles of certain scales and of certain materials, that there are potential health risks.
New British research has added to that concern. It found nanoparticles could damage cells without even entering them. Scientists found the particles change the function of cells and how they communicate with other cells.
What this study shows is that even with a barrier between the blood supply where the nanoparticles are and cells, that there can be damage to cells, and not just a bit of damage, but significant damage to the DNA.
One of the biggest areas of concerns has been the use of nanoparticles in sunscreen. A review this year by the Therapeutic Goods Administration found sunscreen was safe and that the particles didn't penetrate skin cells. If trends in science continue, there's no doubt nanoparticles will be used more and more.
We really need to do fairly sophisticated studies of the toxicity of nanoparticles before we used them extensively in humans.
The TGA says it will monitor scientific literature should any tangible safety concerns be identified. Sophie Scott, ABC News.
We have to realize that as robots become more sophisticated, more intelligent, there is a chance that they could become very, very superior to us, in which case we should think about merging with them.
Alright, so smart dust is a reality, and it's possible that they are already distributing smart dust by way of chemtrails. And real quick, chemtrails are admittedly true, and many people don't believe they exist still. But they most certainly do, and I can prove it in 20 seconds with simple observations. 1. Sometimes chemtrail planes fly parallel to normal planes, and the normal plane clearly shows regular condensation trails. And 2. Sometimes they turn off the chemtrails and turn them back on in midair. So this leads me to my next point. Let's have a look at Morgellons disease.
Good evening. Tonight we're going to focus on a controversial and mysterious condition known as Morgellons. There are thousands who say they suffer from its bizarre symptoms, but there are many in the worlds of science and medicine who believe that it's all in the mind. Well, now the government has weighed in, acknowledging that people are suffering and accepting the need for proper scientific investigation. So the Centers for Disease Control today announced that it would begin a new in-depth study to try and explain this strange condition. My co-anchor Cynthia McFadden reports.
Mary began poring through the medical literature, looking for clues. What she discovered was a 17th century reference to a strange disease with so-called harsh hairs called Morgellons. She named the strange fibers Morgellons disease and put the information on a website. Since then, more than 4,500 people have contacted Mary, claiming they too have Morgellons-type symptoms.
If you do a literature search in the medical literature, there is no Morgellons disease. The skin symptoms fit perfectly with the same group of individual symptoms that we saw in patients with delusions of parasitosis.
Delusions of parasitosis. In other words, it's all in their heads. And despite today's announcement, many doctors remain skeptical that this is a real medical condition at all.
They've pre-decided that these symptoms are too impossible to be real, so they've come to this conclusion that it's a delusion.
Randy Wymore is not a medical doctor, but he is a scientist at Oklahoma State University. He started out as a skeptic too, but years ago, after taking a closer look at the fibers, he changed his mind. And he says other doctors might also, if only they would look.
And the few that have seen patients often have never actually gotten down with either a handheld microscope or a dermatoscope and looked at the patient's skin to see these fibers.
On the day we filmed this, Wymore's colleague, Dr. Rhonda Casey, examined that chronic sore on Drew's lip, which, after 5 years, still had not healed.
Plain as day, definitely a fiber. There are fibers there, and I have never seen fibers in any other child's rash similar to this.
What are the symptoms, and what, from your view, from your studies, what exactly is Morgellons disease?
My view of Morgellons is basically the result of industrialization. The list of symptoms is extremely long. It's almost similar to like a fungal overload, pathogenic overload, and there's so many related symptoms. Some of the more prominent ones being the body actually growing these fibrils or hairs, the body producing artifacts of some kind, whether they're some people, I've even met a couple of people that are producing plant-like material growing out of their skin. There's actually these non-earthling type of insects being come out of their body. I mean, unbelievable stories that I would never have believed it unless I was standing in their house witnessing this. Hexagons, I mean, on our website, the Morgellons Research Group, chimtrails.com, there's probably 1,000 pictures that you can see. They're real. It's unbelievable. It's like the science fiction channel come to life.
Absolutely, I agree with you, as well.
Can you guys see how all this might tie together? They could very well be distributing smart dust and many other things into our system using chemtrails, sunblock, lotion, other hygiene products, medicine, and even food and drink. Is this part of an ongoing plan to turn human beings into walking receivers that are dumbed down by toxins and filled with heavy metals? Robot zombie citizens that can easily be tracked and identified as they travel through the smart cities? Are we in the process of a full-on Grey Goo takeover? Well, I think so. That's why I made this video. This has been ODD. Thanks for watching.
Is fragments of insect skin being extracted from a Morgellon victim. So something makes these, something from this disease is making insect parts or insects grow within the human body. Yes.
We'll have this.
He said it had been tested in the last Iraq war. This was the war was only done for the purpose of testing the system.
Now you're talking about the most recent one with
yes,
George Bush.
with the junior.
With W.
Yeah.
Bush.
Yeah.
And they sprayed that in Iraq.
And they sprayed it in Iraq, and we had single news, for example, that they fought back the Iraqi army by utilizing microwave weapons that gave them the feeling that the skin burns. Yeah. This was in public media and yes. mainstream media. And this is not because the microwave weapon had the intensity to make it burn. This is because the RNA was triggered to create the sensation of burning. Right. So this had a kind of agent within the bodies of the Iraqi army. They tested all other aspects of it.
Which are these aspects?
From the text, he says you have these psychotronic weapons, making them give up, making them fall in love with the American soldiers, whatever. A long list of psychotronic functions. And you can make people sick, you can make them die of cancer after 1 year, you can make them die in 6 minutes, and you can make them die in 6 seconds if you want to. This is what he listed. And but the most interesting thing from this paper is that he said that they spent 10 billion US and half a year, I think it was half a year, to optimize the cluster topology. And this is something, it sounds just like science fiction if you say it like this, but if you really think about it, if it is only about infecting humans with a virus-like synthetic RNA, you could give a damn about cluster topology. Cluster topology starts to become an interesting topic if this RNA cluster is supposed to carry a soul. Only then a soul or an artificial intelligence or whatever, an RNA. This is kind of the first time that I had an input, an idea of how do they turn people into biorobots. You have the RNA cluster within the air, sprayed in the air with a defined distance from RNA to RNA. And within the human body, the same RNA cluster is prolonged within the cells. And now, whatever is carried by these clusters, the artificial intelligence or a program or a soul, whatever this is, can travel from the dust
into the human being.
This is smart dust.
And this is what they call smart dust.